Chapter 301. Aren't you going to wipe off my sweat caused by you? Gu Jingze said, what's with that look? I'm not going to eat you up. Lin Che was so slow and obviously didn't want to go to him. Gu Jingze's face darkened as he gazed at Lin Che. His eyes were sharp like knives. Lin Che remained standing there. She looked at him in the eyes and slowly stepped forward. Gu Jingze couldn't wait any longer. He reached out and pulled her onto the bed. Lin Che fell onto him. Gu Jingze grabbed her hands and placed them on his chest. He looked down at her. His eyes were like torches that burned into Lin Che's. Why are you afraid of me because you got injured the last time? He asked. No, Lin Che didn't feel much the last time. It was a lot better on the second day, and although it was slightly uncomfortable after that, it didn't hurt anymore. After all, it actually didn't tear that much. He was just being too worried. Gu Jingze continued grabbing her hands. Then why have you been avoiding me? No, I'm not, Lin Che mumbled. Gu Jingze's eyes hardened as he glared at Lin Che. Gradually, he watched Lin Che's face turn red. He slowly reached under her clothes. Lin Che quickly stopped him and she looked into his eyes. The nervousness on her face made Gu Jingze's heart ache. He kissed her lips gently. He spoke softly as if he was coddling her. Good girl, I'll be gentle. Gu Jingze slowly pulled her hand away. Lin Che's lips moved and Gu Jingze continued whispering in her ear, really, I'll be so gentle that it won't hurt at all. We'll take it slow this time. His hand reached out first. He was so careful as if it was his first time. He only inched closer after she accepted it. The bed was squeaking and it made Lin Che more nervous. She felt that this bed absolutely could not support them. Gu Jingze said that he would be gentle, and indeed he was. But when he was fiercer, it was equally amazing. Tonight, with the accompaniment of this noise, Gu Jingze finally released all his pent-up energy from the past few days. Hugging Lin Che, he was a lot more relaxed now that she wasn't hurt this time. She hit him forcefully. Bastard. Bastard. Stop talking about that. Gu Jingze kissed her lips. Isn't that a compliment to a woman? It's like telling a man that he is big. Get lost. No way, gangster. Gu Jingze ignored her embarrassment and continued, but our problem is that I'm too big and you're too small, so, our good points became our obstacles, right? Gu Jingze. Lin Che looked up and exclaimed. Ha 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 ha. Gu Jingze laughed out loud. He was surprised at his own laughter. They didn't say much, but he was so amused. Lin Che rested. Although her body still felt sore, she decided to get off the bed to wash up. It wasn't much a bathroom. Granny always boiled her own water to bathe. But it was in the middle of the night and it naturally wouldn't be good to boil that much water. Lin Che pondered for a while. She heated up some water and made do with it. She cooled down the hot water with some cold water. Lin Che looked at Gu Jingze and said, there's no other choice. You can only rinse off and wipe yourself. Gu Jingze walked over and nodded. He didn't complain and began wiping himself. When he couldn't reach his back, he called for Lin Che to help him. Lin Che pouted and asked, can't you just leave it if you can't reach it? Gu Jingze squinted at her. What? All this sweat was caused by you and you're not helping me wipe them off now. What's the meaning of this? Why did he have to sweat so much? She didn't ask him to use so much effort. It was because he took so long. That was why it was hot. Gu Jingze tried to reach behind but he couldn't. Lin Che was only whining just now. She didn't really intend to not help him. Seeing him try so hard, she walked over, took the towel, dipped it in the water, and wiped his body. As he sat there, his rippled back gave her a huge sense of security. Lin Che carefully wiped while Gu Jingze smiled ever so often. He thought that such a simple feeling was really heartwarming. The room was rudimentary and didn't have a lot much, but with the two of them lingering there, it felt amazing. Gu Jingze was done wiping himself and Lin Che heated up the water again so that she could wash herself. She felt a lot more comfortable after a simple rinse off. The southern city was not as cold as the north. After both of them were done cleaning up, they laid on the bed together. Gu Jingze suddenly felt that the atmosphere was excellent. He hugged Lin Che and looked around the tiny room. The size of the room actually didn't matter. What mattered was the person beside you. If the person next to you was not someone you liked, you would still feel vexed even if you were staying in a castle. But if that one person was beside you, then even sleeping on the streets would instantaneously become perfect. Lin Che laid down and rested her head on his arm. This is one night. Will you be going back tomorrow? Gu Jingze frowned. You're chasing me away. Why was he always misinterpreting her words? Lin Che said, not at all. I just feel like you're so busy and this place is hard to live in. It doesn't really suit you. Gu Jingze replied, will you go back too? Lin Che shook her head. I only just got here and was prepared to stay for a few days. I also took leave from the crew. If I left so quickly, Granny will definitely be disappointed. Gu Jingze heard this and looked down at her. Then I'm staying for a few days too. Huh? Lin Che asked, what about your work? I'm the boss. Of course, I can go whenever I want to. So stubborn. Lin Che asked again, but this place is so terrible. I'm worried that you'll feel uncomfortable. Didn't I already mention that I'm done voluntarily teaching? It was much tougher back then and I didn't even have the chance to clean myself. They were living in poverty there and it was totally dry. They didn't have water and there was not enough to drink. Perhaps we won't be able to wipe ourselves today. It might be a struggle to even wash our faces. Wow, you went to such a tough place. Lin Che looked up in admiration at him. Gu Jingze nodded. My grandfather said that we needed to experience being poor in order to appreciate our wealth. Then, why did you become such a troublesome neat freak? Lin Che asked in puzzlement. Chapter 302. A good-looking person will find an equally good-looking person. Gu Jingze frowned at this petite woman. Why are you being silly? Of course, I had to toughen up while staying at a tough place. But when I got back home, I had all the food and clothes I wanted. If I continued pretending to live a hard life, what's the point of working so hard to make money? Come for your wife to spend, Lin Che said shamelessly. Lin Che stuck out her tongue. What? A man earns money for his wife to spend. That is the unquestionable truth. Yes, that's the unquestionable truth. Gu Jingze looked at her speechlessly. Then, don't you know how to hand over your credit cards and salary? Lin Che asked. Gu Jingze looked at her, lowered his head, and said, if I hand them to you, are you able to account for them? Lin Che thought about what everyone said. Gu Jingze's assets were equal to an entire nation's. But she really didn't know what that meant. Lin Che retorted, humph, petty guy. Don't give it to me then. I don't care. I'm going to the toilet. Gu Jingze looked at this petite woman and helplessly shook his head. She was really eccentric. After a while, Lin Che returned. She stood at the foot of the bed and looked at the decor of the room. The furniture was simple. There were a desk, bed, simple books, tools and a dresser below. She opened the dresser and she immediately caught the scent of mold. There was a pile of clothes inside. She could tell that they were outdated as if they were from the 60s. Lin Che then saw something else at the side. It was an album. Lin Che froze and picked up the album. There are pictures of my mom in here, she remarked. Gu Jingze heard this, got up, and walked over to her. Both of them sat down and went through the photos. Lin Che saw a young girl with 2 braids. She stood in the middle and looked so fresh and pretty. This is my mother. She was much younger back then, but I can tell that it's her. My mother was really pretty when she was young. Gu Jingze looked at the photo and looked up at Lin Che. You look like your mother. Lin Che looked up and laughed. I do. Gu Jingze nodded. No wonder she was so pretty. He could tell that she was almost a splitting image of her mother. Her face was just slightly smaller than her mother's. Lin Che looked at the photo. There were a few other people in it but her father was not in the photo. Her mother smiled so happily that Lin Che thought, perhaps she hadn't met her father at that time. Her mother was so blissful and happy before she met her father. The people inside were all strangers to Lin Che. She didn't recognize any of them. Lin Che flipped through a few others and most of the pictures featured these strangers. The sky was darker now. Gu Jingze hugged Lin Che but did not rush her to sleep. After a long time, Lin Che yawned. Gu Jingze then said, come on, let's sleep. We'll continue tomorrow. Lin Che nodded and went to bed with him. She had a good night's dream. Lin Che felt that this place was especially refreshing and easy. It was as if she was far away from all her worries. When Lin Che woke up and walked out the door, she saw that Granny was already up and tidying the yard. Granny, Lin Che walked over and said. You're up so early. Yes, we're not like you young people who like to burn the midnight oil. We sleep early and wake up early naturally. I'm also getting old and don't need that much sleep. Thus, I can't sleep for very long. Lin Che heard this and felt shy. She couldn't help but think about how Granny didn't sleep a lot, saying that they liked burning the midnight oil. Did Granny hear anything last night? She froze for a moment, but Granny didn't say anything else and continued sweeping. Lin Che then quickly said, Granny, let me do it. No need, no need. Just leave it to me. I take it as exercise. Otherwise, these old bones of mine will get rusty. Why don't you take a walk around? Is Jing's not up yet? Lin Che could only put it down and said, yes, he's still sleeping. He wakes up at 6 a.m. every day. He'll be up soon. Really, he's that punctual, and why are you up so early? I wanted to come out and watch the sunrise. She felt that the dawn air was great. The sound of birds chirping outside was also especially pleasant. Thus, she broke out of habit and woke up to watch the sunrise. People in this town all woke up early. Some rode their bikes to get breakfast while others went to work or school. When they saw Lin Che with Granny, they slowed down and smiled. Ah, Granny Chu. You have a guest. Gazing at Lin Che, that 20-something-year-old chap's eyes instantly lit up. Hey, your guest looks familiar. Granny chuckled. What? This is my granddaughter. She's not a guest. Oh my, really? She's so pretty. I thought a celebrity was here. Ha ha ha. Another neighbor came over, smiling and asking, Old Granny Chu, why was there a row of cars here yesterday? Who was that? Granny smiled at Lin Che and said, that was Little Che's husband. He came here to find her. Oh my, really, that grand? Yes, Little Che married well and that makes me relieved. Granny touched Lin Che's hand as she spoke. Lin Che also smiled back at Granny. On top of the wall, another person climbed up, looked at Lin Che, smiled, and said, Wow, old Granny Chu. Everybody is saying that your granddaughter is here and looks like a fairy. They weren't bluffing. This town was small, so news traveled fast. It was not long before everybody seemed to have come over to take a look. Lin Che looked at all the visitors bashfully. How could she be some fairy? An ant leaned against the wall and looked at Lin Che. She seemed very amazed and spoke after staring at Lin Che a long time. You are so gorgeous. What's your name? I'm Lin Che. Oh my, that's a nice name. Have you found a partner? I have a son who just graduated from university and came back. He's also handsome. I can introduce him to you. Granny quickly said, Enough, our little Che is already married. Really? Just then, someone coughed dryly behind. Lin Che turned around to see Gu Jingze standing there, looking at Lin Che and Granny. He was still wearing the clothes from yesterday. The clothes were wrinkled now, but it didn't look unglamorous on him at all. Instead, he looked quite fashionable. Granny smiled at the ant and said, See, this is our little Che's husband. That ant stared at Gu Jingze until her eyes almost popped out. There was really such a handsome man on earth and not just on TV. She looked enviously at Gu Jingze and Lin Che. Then, she said, Tisk, tisk. Such good-looking people getting together. Their future babies are going to be ridiculously gorgeous. Chapter 303. Gu Jingze was really attentive. Lin Che heard this and turned around to look at Gu Jingze behind her. His eyes narrowed as he walked towards Lin Che's side. Lin Che looked up and asked, You're awake? Gu Jingze patted her head. Silly, I'm already standing here. If this isn't me awake, then you must be seeing my ghost. Lin Che pouted, rubbed her head, and said, Idiot. I was greeting you. Gu Jingze only smiled and shot a glance at her. The ant looked at this loving scene. When she stared at Gu Jingze, her heart was sighing in amazement. Ah, we've never seen such a good-looking guy around here. Old Granny Chu, you are really lucky. Granny also looked up at the two of them. As an experienced person, she naturally understood what the best state was between two people. When two people bickered like this, it was when they loved each other the most. Because it seemed like it was already part of their everyday lives and they would not be deliberately holding back. Granny was very happy. She looked at them and said, "Come eat." Gu Jingze ate with them. After that, he circled around and looked everywhere. Lin Che only wandered around and looked out from the inside. Gu Jingze helped Granny pack up, even though he had to go on the phone from time to time. Granny looked at Lin Che, smiled, and said, "Jingze is really not a bad person. I only spent a few days in B City and don't him very well, but for him to stay here because of you and not mind anything, he is wonderful." Lin Che gazed softly outside. "Yes. He has always been wonderful." Granny smiled and said, "That's the way it should be when a husband and wife are together. I really like this Jingze the more I see him. He has a great personality and more importantly, he doesn't look down on us at all. You have a better life than your mother." Sigh. "Granny, has Mom ever told you about how she met my father? The strange thing was I looked through the photos and didn't find anyone who looked like him. Was it because she hadn't met my father while she was here?" Granny replied, "Indeed. Your mother later ran away from home and went to B City on her own. That was how she met your dad. Before that, we've never heard of such a person. My mom ran away from home to go to B City." Lin Che never heard her mother talk about her past. Even until now, she didn't know why or how her mother ended up as a mistress, and her mother never once explained it to her either. Granny said, "Those people in the photos were volunteer teachers who came down that year. One of her teachers, Mr. Liu, liked your mother a lot and encouraged her to go to the university in B City. Your mother got in, but we didn't have the money to provide for her education. We were very poor back then and would have been satisfied if she went to a nearby university. However, your mother was stubborn and went to B City on her own. She didn't want a cent from us. After that happened, she would still call us sometimes but the calls gradually decreased. Even until she passed away, she never told us how exactly she was doing." Granny thought about it and sighed, "I always wondered what would happen if we let her go to B City back then. We could have worked harder and let her attend university. Then, maybe it wouldn't have ended up like this. She fought alone outside and must have suffered a lot. That's why she ran out of energy so fast and passed away." Lin Che held Granny's hand and said plainly, "Nobody expected things to end this way. Everyone's situation was bad at that time. You didn't want this to happen either. I'm a person from a small place and I don't understand all these. I'm not some refined person, so by the time I realize things, it's too late. But I believe that your mother was not a bad person. They all said that your mother became someone's lover, but I refuse to believe it. Your mother must have been duped." "Yes, I don't believe it either." They chatted for a while and Lin Che said, "Then can I bring the photo back with me, Granny? I don't have a single photo of Mom back home." "Of course you can. Take it and help me keep it. I'm getting old and can't keep it much longer." "No way. You're even healthier than me. You'll definitely live a long life." At noon, the three of them ate lunch. Gu Jingze suddenly said, "Granny, I've arranged a house just nearby. It's not convenient for you here. Why don't you move over there tomorrow to live more comfortably?" Granny heard this and was shocked. "Ah, there's no need to. I'm so old anyway. How many more years can I live? I can just live here. This place is enough for me." "Granny, you may still be agile, but you're getting older now. It's not convenient here. It's too tiring to go to the restroom or the kitchen. The place I found for you is just next door. It's not too far away. It's just behind and it's not especially big. It's very suited for you. If you move over there, you will still be surrounded by neighbors and you'll still be familiar with your surroundings." "But it's such a waste. I don't need such a good place," Granny said. Gu Jingze said, "Lin Che works hard to earn a living so that her family can live comfortably. Otherwise, how can we live in peace if we are to enjoy at home while our elders suffer? Lin Che stays far away and can't be by your side daily. If you lived in a nicer, comfier place, and you don't tire yourself out, Lin Che will be relieved in B City, right?" Lin Che heard this and saw Granny nod. "Yes, yes, Granny. Otherwise, I will always want to come and see you. I won't be able to work properly." Hearing these words, Granny's eyes began to water. But ultimately, she agreed to it. After that, Gu Jingze brought Lin Che and Granny to the new house behind. It was at the back of the small town and wasn't far from here, taking only about 10 minutes to walk there. It was a new estate with a row of small buildings in front and normal apartment-style houses behind. Gu Jingze chose a small building at the front with a total floor space of over 200 square meters. There were 2 floors and the house was already renovated. She could move in any time. Gu Jingze said, I asked for the bedroom and stuff to be placed downstairs. This way, Granny won't have to run up and down. Granny still felt that it was a waste. She said, this place is too huge and nice. Lin Che looked at Gu Jingze. He already arranged for the changes. He stood there, looked at Lin Che and asked, why are you staring at me? Lin Che's mind was occupied with the thought that he was settling all this just now. She thought that he was doing his work, so he was constantly on the phone. It turned out that he was helping Granny find a new place. Chapter 304. He always knew Lin Che's kindness. Without any signs, he already did everything and he did it so well. Lin Che looked at Gu Jingze and felt that she was simply infatuated with him. Why was she the one with such a good husband? Why did you suddenly want to do all this for Granny? You didn't tell me anything. Because you have limited intelligence and won't be able to think of much. Of course, I will think more. He rolled his eyes at her. Lin Che pouted, I wasn't this dumb in the past. Your words must be making me dumber and dumber. Don't you know that people need to be encouraged? If you continue bashing me instead of praising me, of course, I'll be stupid. Forget it. As long as you're with me, you don't need to be so bright anyway, Gu Jingze retorted. The main thing is that there's nothing praiseworthy about you. Lin Che wanted to rip his mouth off. This man was great in every aspect. He was also good to others and was like a gentleman. But to her, why was his mouth so foul? Why did he always make fun of her pain? Lin Che looked at him and thought, that's right. Ever since she got with him, she basically didn't have any problems with her life. He thought through everything for her. But what if she didn't have him anymore? She became so dumb because of his pampering. Wouldn't she get killed in the future? She sighed and looked speechlessly at Gu Jingze. After that, Gu Jingze let his men begin moving Granny's belongings. Granny lived simply, but since she stayed there for very long, she had many things. Gu Jingze let his men carry the belongings while others tidied up at the new place. It was a huge commotion and people around couldn't resist spectating. The neighbors asked, Old Granny Chu, where are you moving to? Granny happily told her neighbors, my grandson-in-law bought a house. I'm going to stay there. Is it that newly built house? It's expensive there. Your grandson-in-law is very generous to you. Yes, the kids are so filial. I really don't know what to say. The neighbors chattered noisily as they watched the movers move back and forth. It was a very lively scene. Some people were also wondering what these people were doing. They were all wearing the same clothes and looked cold and mighty. They even listened specifically to Gu Jingze's instructions. Finally, everything was moved over to the new house. Gu Jingze's men also cleaned up the place and did not leave a speck of dust behind. He even specifically found a nanny here to come to clean every day. The nanny wasn't going to be there all the time so that Granny wouldn't get used to it. Lin Che also helped pack up the luggage and rested outside with Granny. Granny smiled and said, I've never lived in such a nice place my entire life. Seems like I've gotten a little bit of Little Che's good fortune. Lin Che replied, Granny, this is nothing. I will earn more money in the future for you to spend. Forget it. It's better to keep it for yourself. I've never raised you and it's not right to live off you. Lin Che said, don't say that, Granny. You may not have raised me, but my mother grew up under your care. This is the power of blood and this is a tradition. My mother never took care of you for a day, but you went through hardships to raise her for so many years. There's no need to be so calculative between us. If we needed to be calculative in relationships, that would be despicable, right? Granny's eyes watered even more. She looked at Lin Che, held her hand, and said, Little Che, your mother taught you so well. Lin Che smiled back at Granny. She turned her head and saw Gu Jingze staring at her from the side. Lin Che felt shy under his stare and turned back around, but she couldn't resist stealing a glance at the man behind. He only continued staring deeply at this petite woman, his expression changing only slightly. He still didn't make a sound. When everything was settled, Granny went to prepare food as part of the housewarming. Lin Che went out to take something and saw that Gu Jingze was following her. Lin Che said, "Go take a rest. I'll do it." Gu Jingze replied, "It's okay. You don't have to do anything. I'll help you take whatever you want." Lin Che smiled and pointed at the plates up in the cupboard. Gu Jingze reached up and easily retrieved them. It was good to be tall. Gu Jingze said, "It would be nice if you could talk like that towards me too." "Talk like what?" "Those words you said to Granny just now." Lin Che was shy knowing that he heard what she said just now. She wondered if Gu Jingze found her too emotional. "Why, I was just casually talking. Also, sometimes you say nasty words to me too and you dare to talk about me." "Humph. But I didn't think that you would realize it. Looks like I underestimated you," Gu Jingze remarked. "What do you mean?" she asked him and blinked, not understanding his words. Gu Jingze only lowered his head and sighed. His eyes were fixated on her petite face. Without saying more, he looked up and replied, "Nothing." Lin Che said, "Seriously? You're not going to finish your sentence?" "If I knew you were such an idiot, I wouldn't have to finish it." Did this woman really not understand that he was complimenting her? She was so sadly stupid. Lin Che huffed and couldn't be bothered to argue with him. She looked up at him and said, "But I still have to thank you this time for doing so much for my granny." Gu Jingze replied, "It was my duty to do so." "How can that be? This was my duty." "It's all because I'm your husband," he tapped her head and said. "I naturally couldn't watch Granny live so simply while I live in a villa back home. What you said was right. We may have only just met her, but she is your grandmother. We can't simply watch her suffer, so we should do whatever we can. It is only right that we do. That saying is true, when your parents are still working so hard, what reason do we have to enjoy ourselves?" Lin Che nodded furiously and looked gratefully at Gu Jingze. "Yes. Granny must have a reason for meeting me now. The roots are deep and it has been ages. Sometimes, there's no way for us to investigate." "Yeah, come on, let's go in and eat," he put an arm around her shoulders and said. He always knew that Lin Che was a kind-hearted girl. Gu Jingze looked at Lin Che and couldn't resist smiling slightly. The few of them spent the night at the new house. After another 2 days, it was finally time for Lin Che to leave and return to B City. Lin Che said goodbye to Granny, who smiled and said, "I'll be fine here. Don't worry about me and work hard. Treat Jingze well and live well together. I will be relieved then." Lin Che nodded furiously, "I will come and see you often." "Yes, I'll see you on TV every day." "Okay, then I'll definitely appear more on TV," Lin Che laughed and raised a small fist. Chapter 305. I want to see where Saint Lin Che is from. The two of them said goodbye to Granny and walked out together. Gu Jingze's car was already prepared. They sat in his car, no longer needing to take the train. They went straight to the provincial capital where the airport was. Watching a line of people leaving, people all around enviously watched Chu Shuyun upgrade to a big house. They were amazed. But she was the one with such a good granddaughter. She was starting to enjoy life in her golden years. All her suffering in the past was overshadowed. Lin Che boarded the plane with Gu Jingze. On the plane, Lin Che kept staring at the photo she brought along. Gu Jingze looked at her and asked, "Where is your mother's grave?" Lin Che said, "It's at Nanshan Cemetery. I go there twice a year." "Bring me there next time," he looked at Lin Che and said. Lin Che looked up and gazed silently at Gu Jingze. Gu Jingze asked, "You are married to me. Shouldn't I go visit my mother-in-law?" He would never admit that the person from the Lin household was his father-in-law. But when it came to Lin Che's mother, it was needless to say. He looked at the photo and also secretly thought that her mother was absolutely not like what was rumored. There must have been some unknown reason for the rumor of her as a mistress to spread. They got down the plane and received news from the Gu family. They were preparing for Gu Jingyan's wedding and needed Gu Jingze to go home. Gu Jingze said to Lin Che, "Let's head straight to the Gu house. I think we will be staying there tonight." "Oh," Lin Che replied. After leaving stubbornly for a few days and making Gu Jingze follow her in the small town, she wondered if she had taken up his time. However, Gu Jingze didn't seem to mind. Lin Che could only look up apologetically at him. Meanwhile, the Gu house. Lu Chusha was visiting the Gu family. As the Lu family and Gu family were going to join in the matrimony, she spent more time here during the past few days. It was a pity that Gu Jingze was never around. Gu Jingyan and Mu Wanqing walked out together and saw that Lu Chusha was here again. Mu Wanqing said to Gu Jingyan, Chusha's relationship with Baiken is really deep. The sister cares so much about her brother's wedding. Gu Jingyan didn't want to say that she was caring about Gu Jingze and not herself. Mu Wanqing didn't dislike Lu Chusha and she was fond of her brother. She just was a little unhappy with Lu Baiken. He was going to be married soon and yet he only showed his face a couple of times. She cares more than the brother, Mu Wanqing said. Gu Jingyan smiled, he's definitely busier than Chusha as the heir to the Lu family. All the wedding stuff is already settled anyway. Mu Wanqing said, I quite like you with Baiken. You two match well, his family background is good, and he's a nice person. He's a bit frivolous, but it's a good thing among these guys. It's also good that he's running his own company. It'll be good to work together and help each other out in the future. But he doesn't really seem to care about you, so of course, I'm a little worried. Gu Jingyan said, Mom, I don't need some man to care about me. It's just a wedding. We're busy with our own work and we're fine like this. I'm not like some carefree, stay-at-home wife who constantly needs company. Mu Wanqing said, a girl shouldn't be too strong-headed. Gu Jingyan said, I like being this way. What's the point of idling at home? I like to work. Mu Wanqing sighed and looked at Gu Jingyan. Gu Jingyan watched Mu Wanqing leave and then looked at Lu Chusha. Indeed, this sister was more caring than her brother. Gu Jingyan thought that this was the marriage she wanted. She couldn't blame anyone else and she wouldn't do that. Actually, Gu Jingyan and Lu Baiken have always been stirred together by others since they were in high school. But at that time, it was because they were constantly competing for top student. And Gu Jingyan was just someone who never showed her weakness. She was always suppressing Lu Baiken from the moment they entered high school and until they graduated. He was the second place for 3 years. At that time, they were friends and enemies. She, Fu Chengxi, Lu Baiken, Ruan Qingshan and Guo Junyan. The 5 of them were always together and stuck to each other like shadows. But none of them knew about her feelings for Lu Baiken until the end. Fu Chengxi's family background was not good and was looked down on by the Lu family. Thus, she left Lu Baiken. Gu Jingyan then had a future with Lu Baiken. Someone once told her, Gu Jingyan, you're so stupid. Since you knew that you wanted to be with Baiken, why didn't you give in to him more in high school? Let him try to be the boss. When he marries, he will definitely remember how you abused him for 3 years. Another person told her, after you marry Jingyan, you must never be so competitive anymore. You must bow your head more in front of your husband. Gu Jingyan knew that she and Lu Baiken were a great match, whether it was in bed, work, or life. However, in terms of feelings, they were both strong-headed and didn't know how to show weakness. Gu Jingyan could only smile at those people and told them that she was just like that. But she never told anybody that no matter how much weakness she displayed, that man would never change towards her. In his heart, the best woman was Fu Chengxi and Gu Jingyan would never be Fu Chengxi. Gu Jingyan looked at Lu Chusha. Chusha, I think you should just give up now. I don't think my second brother will be moved by you. This person's brain is too stubborn. Lu Chusha replied, my brain is also stubborn. I want to see whose brain is more stubborn. Lu Chusha thought that this could be her only chance. The woman beside him now was not Mo Hilling but rather, a woman who didn't deserve him. If she wasn't going to get him now, all the other socialites were going to go crazy over him when he breaks off with that woman one day. She needed to have a head start. Otherwise, she wouldn't have a chance with so much competition. Just then, a maid from outside said that second young master and his wife were here. Lu Chusha froze. Did that Lin Che also follow him here? As the maid spoke, she already stood up and followed Gu Jingyan out. Gu Jingyan looked at her. My sister-in-law is with my second brother. Lu Chusha said, that's why I wanted to take a look. She wanted to see how this Lin Che looked like. How was she able to make Gu Jingze give up Mo Hiling and marry her instead? Even though it was a forced marriage, she also wanted to see what kind of woman could make the Gu family want to bring her in. Chapter 306. Didn't expect Lin Che to be like this. Gu Jingze and Lin Che arrived at the Gu house. When they got off the plane, they felt very dusty. Gu Jingze naturally put a hand on her shoulder and brought her in. Because she had been here a few times already, Lin Che gradually became familiar with the direction. When she entered, she even faced the maids she had met before and greeted them. "Welcome back, second young master and second young madam. Quick, come in, second young master and second young madam." Everyone welcomed them in. Mu Wanqing came out first, smiled and said, "Little Che, you're here. Quick, come in, I heard that you went to stay with your grandmother for a while. How is she?" Lin Che smiled and replied, "Granny is doing very well. Thank you for your concern, Mom. Of course, let Jingze accompany you outside more. He should be doing that instead of staying in his office all the time." Lin Che looked up at Gu Jingze and was a little worried. She would be disrupting his work if she did that. She knew that Gu Jingze was a classic workaholic who prioritized his work. Perhaps he was feeling anxious after going away for a few days, but he didn't want to disappoint Granny. Thus, he didn't leave. Gu Jingze said, "Mom, you're always siding with her now." Mu Wanqing grunted at him. Just then, they heard Gu Jingyan's laughter from inside. "Second brother, you still bear to come home. I thought spending alone time with sister-in-law wouldn't make you want to come back." Mu Wanqing also said to Gu Jingze, "Oh, right. Baiken's sister is here too. You know her, right, Lu Chusha?" Hearing this name, Gu Jingze frowned slightly. Lin Che also froze immediately. Lu Chusha was actually here right now. Gu Jingze didn't say anything, but when everyone dispersed, Lu Chusha and Gu Jingyan were already walking towards them. Lu Chusha immediately saw Gu Jingze standing tall over there. Everybody else around him looked much smaller and there was no need to even mention his aura. Meanwhile, that girl beside him wore a red striped cropped shirt and wide-legged pants. It was simple and elegant. Her hair scattered by her ears and she looked refreshing and pleasant like a faint breeze blowing in the face. Lin Che was very pretty, that was a given. Lu Chusha also thought about it. Otherwise, she wouldn't be a celebrity and be fancied by the Gu family. However, in Lu Chusha's mind, celebrities were carefully crafted products. Their faces were stiff from all the plastic surgery and they looked the same. However, she didn't think that Lin Che's appearance here would instantly give her an unexpected feeling. Lin Che didn't feel like all those other celebrities. She looked unique and beautiful. One could immediately recognize her beauty at a glance. She had large eyes and a petite face too, but she simply looked different from those plastic faces. So unique. Lu Chusha froze on the spot and watched Gu Jingyan smiling as she walked over. She stood behind while looking at Lin Che and suddenly felt some anger in her. Why couldn't she look vulgar? It would make her feel much better that way. But she just had to be this kind of woman who was difficult to grasp. This made Lu Chusha jealous. It was impossible. She must have done plastic surgery and it must have cost a fortune. Gu Jingze was so rich that it was possible that he gave her some money so that she could look better. Lu Chusha stood there and thought angrily. After a while, she then stepped forward. Lin Che immediately saw Lu Chusha walking elegantly from behind. She could tell that she was a rich man's daughter like Mo Hiling, but she seemed different from Mo Hiling. Mo Hiling stayed at home too much, so she looked too leisurely. Lu Chusha, on the other hand, was a socialite. She would know some work etiquette somehow. Lin Che took one look and saw that Lu Chusha seemed to be staring back at her. When their eyes met, Lin Che felt uncomfortable and didn't look at her again. She followed Gu Jingyan in first. "Second brother, sister-in-law, are you guys going to stay for the night?" "Yes." "That's great. Sister-in-law can help me pick a wedding gown. My eyes are going bonkers." "Okay, but my taste isn't that special." "How can that be? Sister-in-law, your style is always so gorgeous on TV." "That is all done by the stylist," Lin Che said frankly. Gu Jingyan said, I also saw the news last time. Your dress was ruined but you altered it until you were able to go on stage. You did that yourself, right? That was a coincidence. Lin Che didn't know how that news blew up. Gu Jingze said, so everyone online said that you were especially fashionable after that. Don't be so modest. Everyone talks about anything online. This time, Lu Chusha finally walked over. Gu Jingze narrowed his eyes at Lu Chusha, stood beside Lin Che, and didn't react. Lu Chusha looked deeply at Gu Jingze first. Then, she suddenly smiled at Lin Che and said, you must be Miss Lin. Lin Che heard Lu Chusha's voice and turned around. Lu Chusha smiled, looking Lin Che up and down. Her expression was friendly, but her eyes were condescending. She said, hello, I'm Lu Chusha. I'm not sure if Jingze has mentioned me. Lin Che looked at Lu Chusha, quietly gazing at her arrogant face. She smiled and said, hell, she looked up at Gu Jingze who never mentioned Lu Chusha to her before. However, she didn't need Gu Jingze to mention her. She already saw the speculations online. As Gu Jingze said, the photo had already been erased. However, the rumor about Gu Jingze and Lu Chusha was still around. Some wondered if Gu Jingze wanted to join the Lu family in marriage. Why was Lu Chusha always by Gu Jingze's side? In everyone's eyes, Gu Jingze was already of the right age to marry but he was not married yet. This was because nobody knew that Gu Jingze already had her as his wife. Gu Jingze looked at Lu Chusha and said to Lin Che, this is Jingyan's sister-in-law. I have never told you about her. Gu Jingze looked at Lu Chusha as he explained, I don't usually share with Lin Che about any rubbish relatives. That's why I never spoke about you. Lu Chusha's face changed slightly. She was also a rubbish relative now. However, looking at Lin Che, Lu Chusha didn't show it on her face. She could only endure those painful words as she looked at Gu Jingze, filled with sadness. After a while, Lu Chusha then smiled and said to Lin Che, it's alright. We'll be seeing each other often in the future. We can just get to know each other now. See each other often. Lin Che didn't want to see her at all. Lin Che smiled and said, okay, but I may be very busy sometimes, so I don't actually come here often. Chapter 307. Seems like you don't know Gu Jingze well. Lu Chusha said, really? I've been coming here more often, especially recently. She spoke as she intentionally glanced at Gu Jingze. In front of so many people, Lu Chusha couldn't say too much. She glanced at him and shifted her eyes away. Mu Wanqing said behind, alright, let's not stand here and talk. We can go in and chat some more. They filed in and Gu Jingze said plainly to Lin Che, sit wherever you like. You can keep my mother company. I'm going to see grandfather. Yeah, okay, Lin Che waved at Gu Jingze and left him to his own matters. Gu Jingyan saw Gu Jingze leave. She thought for a while and followed behind. Gu Jingze walked along the corridor to Gu Shan's room. Grandpa Gu was already living a secluded life and it was rare to see him at home. However, he still needed to greet him every time he came here as a formality. Gu Jingyan looked at Gu Jingze and called out, second brother. Gu Jingze turned around, what's the matter? Nothing. Gu Jingyan caught up to him and said, has Chusha been pestering you recently? It's no bother, Gu Jingze replied. She can do whatever she pleases. I've already advised her but she refused to listen. I thought about it too. It's best to leave this kind of stubborn person to her own devices. Once she gets hurt, she'll stop. Gu Jingze replied, yeah. But if sister-in-law knows about it won't she get unhappy? I didn't tell her, Gu Jingze said. Why? Gu Jingyan looked up and asked. Gu Jingze replied, it's not necessary. Gu Jingyan paused and then nodded understandingly. He made sense. Since there wasn't going to be any fruition, there was no need to tell Lin Che and make matters worse. Gu Jingyan said, alright, then I'll go first. Go on and see grandfather, second brother. Okay. Gu Jingyan always knew that Gu Jingze was a man of few words. She looked speechlessly at Gu Jingze and said, sister-in-law is rather pitiful. She has to be with you and you hardly talk. You're so boring. Sigh. Gu Jingze frowned. Just mind your own business. Gu Jingyan huffed and left. Lin Che also did not disturb Mu Wanqing. She knew that Mu Wanqing usually looked carefree, but she was definitely busy taking care of such a big family. Lin Che looked around the yard, watered the flowers, and tidied up some things at the side. A maid saw Lin Che even plucking the weeds, hurriedly went over, and said, "Young madam, please put that down." "I'll do it. You shouldn't be doing such rough work." Lin Che smiled and said, "I have nothing to do and I saw that these flowers were pretty, so I decided to do something." The maid smiled and looked at Lin Che. "Young madam, if second young master sees this, he will definitely scold us. Second young master treats young madam so well that he won't bear for you to do such things." Lin Che asked speechlessly, "What's there to bear? This is nothing." "Young madam, you're too kind. No wonder second young master and ma'am like you so much." Lin Che heard this and smiled shyly. Her face turned red as she played with her hair. She thought it was good when people liked her. Although she felt that she never did anything, perhaps this family really didn't do anything. Thus, her little gestures made the maids very grateful. To her, this was a small matter. Back at the Lin household, she was just like the maids, doing all the chores and work. Unknown to her, Lu Chusha was already standing behind and watching this whole scene. Lu Chusha had been secretly watching Lin Che. She underestimated Lin Che, so she wanted to see how Lin Che was like. Now that she saw her, she thought that Lin Che's beauty may become a huge obstacle for her. However, she was a girl from an ordinary family. She looked so normal. Lu Chusha huffed and walked over. When Lin Che turned around, she saw Lu Chusha proudly walking over and stood there. Lu Chusha stared at Lin Che, unceremoniously looking her up and down. "I was still thinking why everybody spoke so fondly of you." Lin Che smiled. "What do you mean, Miss Lu?" Lu Chusha said, "I'm still wondering how exactly you made Gu Jingze give up on Mohilling." Lin Che frowned, obviously feeling that this Lu Chusha person was filled with hostility. Lu Chusha said, "Now, I understand. You have some cunning little moves, attracting people's attention in such a low way." Lin Che's face immediately fell. She looked at Lu Chusha and smiled coldly. "Miss Lu, what exactly are you getting at?" Lu Chusha said, "Weren't you trying to win people over just now?" Lin Che scoffed, "I'm sorry, win people over. I don't need to do that." "You don't need to do that. Of course, you would need to make these maids think that you're good so that they will stand on your side. However, we don't need these little tricks. But I guess it makes sense. You don't have power in your family, no background, and you can't bring any benefit to the Gu family. You only know how to tie Gu Jingze down. If you don't use a few more little tricks so that people will be positive about you, there is really nothing good about you. It's only a pity that these tricks won't last long. After you use them too many times, the maids will get used to it and nobody will find you special anymore. But it's only because we don't normally do all these things and that's why they find you special. You should be well aware that these little tricks won't last long." Lin Che looked speechlessly at Lu Chusha. "Miss Lu, your imagination has gone really far. It's just a pity that you're thinking too much. I really have no need for your so-called little tricks." "Really? Never mind, I get it. You'll never admit it no matter what." Lin Che replied, "No matter what you think, I really don't need to. I am the young madam of this family and Gu Jingze's wife. No matter what I do, they can only say good things about me because they know who will be the future headmistress of this house." Lu Chusha froze. Lin Che scoffed and grazed past Lu Chusha's shoulder. "It looks like you don't really understand Gu Jingze that well. Otherwise, you would never say such things." Lu Chusha was starting to panic, but she stared disdainfully at Lin Che as she left. Fine, fine, she underestimated Lin Che this time. Without any tricks, how could she let the Gu family acknowledge her status? It looked like she should not belittle Lin Che in the future. In the future, it seemed like this Lin Che was worthy of being her opponent. Lin Che left the yard and only stopped when she reached the front. Lin Che thought that Lu Chusha indeed didn't understand Gu Jingze. Otherwise, she wouldn't have said those words just now and think that she committed some trick to marry Gu Jingze. That was not the case. She was able to marry Gu Jingze because of his illness. Chapter 308. A wedding of the filthy rich is indeed awe-inspiring. Lin Che thought. It seemed like she didn't know about Gu Jingze's illness. Lin Che took a deep breath. Because she could touch Gu Jingze without igniting his illness, this was more useful than any other trick. However, it was also because his condition was not improving. That's why she didn't have to worry about being replaced by someone else. Unless Gu Jingze could touch another woman one day. Lu Chusha was fuming after she got insulted by a small artist. But thinking about Gu Jingze, she still couldn't bring herself to give up. However, since she couldn't do anything at the Gu house today, she decided to go home. Gu Jingyan sent Lu Chusha out, and seeing that Lu Chusha looked unhappy, she smiled and said, "All right, you must be here on my wedding day." But of course, how can I not attend my brother's wedding? When Gu Jingze came out from his grandfather's room, he took Lin Che back to their home. Lin Che stared out the window and stayed silent in the car. Gu Jingze felt that Lin Che was different. He asked her, "What's wrong? Why are you in such a daze?" Lin Che snapped back to reality and looked at Gu Jingze. The highly sought-after Gu Jingze became her husband. Many people must have thought that she had some connection. In their eyes, they probably thought that their marriage wasn't going to last. Lin Che tidied her hair and smiled, "It's nothing. I just wanted to say that Jingyan's wedding is coming soon and I don't know what gift to get her." Gu Jingze replied, "Forget it. There's nothing to give her anyway. She has everything she needs. Just give her a card to send your good wishes." "Huh, won't that be too stingy?" "What else can you do? The dowry for her marriage was not small. She has 2 investment companies, 3 vacation resorts, and a coal mine. All these are already hers. What else do you need to buy for her?" "Wow, what a large dowry," Lin Che speechlessly said. "Whoever is marrying her is really lucky." "That's right, that guy from the Lu family is really damn lucky. But the Lu family didn't give us any lesser either. Weddings of you filthy rich people are really big enough to shake the whole economy," Lin Che looked up and said. Gu Jingze said, "Not necessarily. But the stocks will definitely see some movements for a few days. Whether that's good or bad is unpredictable. No wonder people say that any movement from the Gu family can shake the entire C nation." "Ah, will the wedding have any media companies attending?" "We only allow a few media companies to enter an interview, but I'm guessing there'll be many more outside the venue." Lin Che heard this and quickly said, "Then I don't think it's a good idea for me to go there. What if I get photographed?" "It's alright. The media probably will not be in the middle area. When the time comes, you can hide a little. Anyway, there'll be a lot of people on that day, so we won't be discovered when we go in." "Okay, I won't be discovered everywhere I go. If you were to disappear, someone will definitely realize." "Why?" "Because," Lin Che thought, "because he was Gu Jingze. Everywhere he went, he would become the focal point. Everyone's eyes would be fixated on his every move. Because you're the brother and a part of the family. Of course, everyone will notice you." Gu Jingze raised his brow. "Won't it be fine if I go to the back where nobody can see me?" "Very well." The rich man here was stubborn and didn't care about how people looked at him. Lin Che got ready and returned to the studio to continue filming. When Lin Che arrived, Yang Lingxin and Yu Minmin both received her. At the studio, everybody was still busy. Because Lin Che was back, the director let the crew prepare for the scene. Yang Lingxin said, "When you left, everyone was still talking about how nice Gu Jingyu is to you. You were able to take leave just by asking and he didn't put you in a spot." Lin Che said, "So what about that? Taking leave, everyone will bound to have an emergency of some sort. Couldn't I just leave?" Yu Minmin said, "It's not that you can't. However, in Gu Jingyu's shows, nobody could leave so easily. After all, Gu Jingyu doesn't have a good temper and he puts on airs. If he doesn't like that you have matters to tend to, he'll switch you out. This was very normal, but you don't have to worry since your relationship with Gu Jingyu is so good. He will never lose his temper with you." Yang Lingxin chimed in, "Yes, yes. I heard them say that no matter what status you hold, as long as you accept a role in Gu Jingyu's film, you must obediently follow Gu Jingyu's instructions. You can't simply say things like you have a program, an endorsement, or another activity and just leave. If you anger Gu Jingyu, he will switch you out no matter how high your position is. That is why everyone says that Gu Jingyu treats Sister Che so well. So there was such a saying. Lin Che replied embarrassingly, I'm sorry. They must have put you guys in a spot. It was an impulsive decision at that time and I didn't think about it. Of course not. Gu Jingyu only asked when you were coming back. There was no trouble at all, Yu Minmin said. Very soon, the few of them entered. Xin Xiaoyuan was drinking mineral water as she looked over. She scoffed and said, our big shot female lead is finally back. They couldn't be bothered with her and went straight inside. Xin Xiaoyuan spat outside, how did she manage to sleep with Gu Jingyu? So arrogant. Enough, Sister Xiaoyuan, don't be angry, she really thinks that she's a big shot without considering how long she has been famous for. Gu Jingyu quickly heard that Lin Che was back. When he came in, Xin Xiaoyuan was sitting there. She quickly got up and greeted, Jingyu. Gu Jingyu looked at Xin Xiaoyuan and acknowledged her with a stiff face. After that, he headed straight inside. Xin Xiaoyuan saw that he was so focused on finding Lin Che that he wasn't even polite to her. She angrily crushed the bottle in her hands. This Lin Che, what was so attractive about her? Why were all these men groveling at her feet? Humph. Gu Jingyu came in and said, you're finally back. I thought you decided to run away. Lin Che said, how can that be? How can I bear to abandon big celebrity Gu's movie? But she still looked gratefully at Gu Jingyu, thank you for letting me take off for so many days. You were only gone for 6 days. It's not that long and everybody has matters to tend to. How did it go? Is everything settled? Gu Jingyu spoke generously, making the crew members listening at the back tongue-tied. Since when did Gu Jingyu speak so nicely? Lin Che said, yes. Everything is just about settled and it's not that big of a deal. It's just going out of town to help my grandmother with some home affairs. Really? That's good. Let's film well. Yes. Thank you, Gu Jingyu. If you're really grateful, then give me a present. You only know how to pay lip service. I'll give you a present. Lin Che speechlessly said. Give you what? This is up to how you value our friendship. Asking me what to give me is no different from asking me what I want. Idiot, go figure it out yourself. Gu Jingyu knocked her head. Ah, I got it. I'll give you a gift. Why did you hit me? Chapter 309, Taking Sides. Everybody looked at them bickering and couldn't help but feel suspicious. Yu Minmin didn't think too much into it. Lin Che was always kind to everybody. People tended to be skeptical, but Gu Jingyu indeed treated her very well. When they left, everybody was still talking amongst themselves. Is there really nothing going on between Gu Jingyu and Lin Che? Of course not. Haven't they already denied it? They are just friends. But I think Gu Jingyu is so nice to her. They look particularly close when they talk to each other and Gu Jingyu never smiles like that with anyone else. Now that Lin Che is back, he even immediately came to find her. Who knows, but they didn't do anything intimate. I saw that when they talked, they also sat far apart. That should be quite clear that they're really just friends. They're friends now because they're in front of everyone. Who knows what happens in private? Maybe they ha. Xin Xiaoyuan gritted her teeth as she listened from behind. She was a big shot participating in Gu Jingyu's movie, but she didn't expect to be overshadowed by that brat. Now, everyone was talking about Lin Che and had no place for Xin Xiaoyuan. The next day, the movie's first poster was published. Lin Che saw the poster and thought that it looked great. Gu Jingyu's creation definitely wasn't going to be lackluster. Lin Che was in the middle, looking amazing. With her long hair flowing, she looked beautiful and full of heroism. However, outside, Xin Xiaoyuan started making a fuss. The reason was that her name was placed behind Lin Che's in the poster. Xin Xiaoyuan immediately approached the director and started confronting him. I've been in this industry for far longer than Lin Che. The awards that I have won far exceed the movies she has acted in. How dare you put my name behind hers? Where will I put my face from now on? The director replied, this is just a placement issue. Either way, aren't you both placed together? It's just wrong to put her name in front of mine. I, Shin Xiaoyuan, have been popular for so many years. Don't you know my appeal? Don't you know how much I have to contribute to the box office for this movie? How could I possibly agree to place her name before mine? The director was extremely stifled watching Shin Xiaoyuan kick a fuss. He could only say, since this poster is already out, can't you just put up with it? Who is going to put up with this? A rearrangement of the names is all that's needed. You can just quickly change it. Tell me if you need money to settle this. Lin Che, Yang Lingxin, and Yu Minmin watched from behind. The director was put in an extremely difficult spot. Shin Xiaoyuan snorted. As she turned and saw Lin Che approach, she began to grit her teeth. What are you looking at, Lin Che? Who here doesn't know that you only got this role because you're close to someone? Do you really think you can climb over me just because you got this role? Let me tell you, I have just as much screen time in the film as you do. Lin Che looked at her. Sister Xiaoyuan, it's just a name. It shouldn't matter who is placed at the front or at the back. When Shin Xiaoyuan heard this, she immediately replied, that's great. You said this yourself. Since you don't mind, your name shall be placed at the back. Lin Che replied, I'm only focused on acting in this film. With regard to the rest, I've only been taking instructions from the others. Haha, you've indeed made it sound pleasant to the ears while pretending to be the bigger person. You act like you don't care on the surface while you plot behind my back. Let me tell you that I have been in the industry for many years. Don't think that I don't know about your little tricks. Lin Che was lost for words. She didn't know what she could say to make this better. The director was very helpless as he did not wish to offend Shin Xiaoyuan, who was an A-class actress. Strictly speaking, she must have been capable in her own rights to make it this far. As for Lin Che, she was indeed the lead actress for this show. It would be inappropriate to place her name at the back. The director was speechless as he looked towards Lin Che. Look, Lin Che, the placement on this poster. Lin Che replied, it doesn't bother me. The role of the lead actress will not simply be determined by the placement of the names. Whoever was the lead actor's rival was the lead actress, and how much screen time a person was given in the movie was another matter. The importance of the screen time was the deciding factor for the lead actress. Yu Minmin chimed in, yes, we must still give Sister Xiaoyuan some face. If she wishes to be placed in the front, she can have it. Shin Xiaoyuan snorted while raising her chin. Just as she was about to speak to the director, a voice echoed from behind, what is happening right now? When the crowd tturned their heads, they saw Gu Jingze making his way over, unsure of when he arrived. The director hurriedly walked over and said, Jingze, it is only a small problem about the poster. The director spoke softly and tried to explain the situation to Gu Jingze. Gu Jingze frowned. He looked at Shin Xiaoyuan and then looked at Lin Che. Lin Che did not look bothered by this at all. Shin Xiaoyuan, on the other hand, raised her head towards the sky in an imposing manner. Gu Jingze snorted and gently placed the poster to his side. He spoke as he addressed the crowd. Lin Che is the lead actress while Shin Xiaoyuan plays the supporting role. This had been set from the start. As the lead actress, it is the rule of this industry to place Lin Che's name at the front. How can you call yourselves veterans in the circle if you have to discuss such a small issue? Lin Che doesn't know as she is still a rookie. Are the rest of you also rookies? The surrounding crowd stumbled for a moment. Lin Che also raised her head at this instance and looked at Gu Jingze. Gu Jingze said candidly, we will set the poster as such. I have looked through it and I am satisfied with the details. There is no need for any further changes. Shin Xiaoyuan scorned. Gu Jingze, my role in the show and my box office capabilities are obviously more significant than hers. Furthermore, I've been in this industry for so many years. Where will I put my face if you were to place my name behind a rookie's? Gu Jingze turned his head and squinted at Shin Xiaoyuan, okay. If you really feel that you are losing face, you can remove yourself from this film. I would like to see just how much my box office will fall without you. Shin Xiaoyuan paused as her expression paled in an instant. She was angry at that moment. Thus, she impulsively said that she would immediately quit. However, the people behind her hung on to her, unwilling to let her leave. Sister Xiaoyuan, let's not talk about just how much a huge loss you would incur if you left this movie that has unparalleled potential. This is Gu Jingze we're talking about. Once you offend him, who will dare to hire you in the future? Xin Xiaoyuan stared at Gu Jingze in front of her. She was extremely resentful at the moment. However, she knew deep down that she was unable to match up to him. Thus, even though she was about to explode, she was forced to keep her cool. She could only hate the fact that she ran into Gu Jingze, who clearly supported Lin Che's group. Chapter 310, Dispute Rumors. She said, well fine, I'll give Jingze some face. With regard to this matter, I'll listen to him. Gu Jingze grunted and said, okay director, we'll set the poster as such. Please proceed to publish it. Upon hearing this, the director nodded and hurriedly replied, yes, yes, yes. Looking at Gu Jingze's imposing manner, thoughts surfaced in the heart. Gu Jingze was indeed not afraid of anybody. This would save them a lot of trouble. Xin Xiaoyuan stared at Lin Che furiously one last time before leaving quickly with her people. Although she walked away haughtily, after being treated this way by Gu Jingze, it was obvious that she was fleeing with her tail between her legs. As the crowd left, everyone looked at Gu Jingze. They acknowledged him with much more respect and slowly dispersed one by one. Lin Che only realized now that Gu Jingze's temper was not fantastic and he was unafraid of anything regarding the actors. It was just that he had never been like this in front of her. However, Lin Che felt that she had always been very obedient. She was always obeying instructions due to her status as a newcomer, unlike Xin Xiaoyuan who always put on airs. That was probably why she never saw this side of Jingze. Seeing that the crowd had dissipated, Gu Jingze said to Lin Che, look at you. You still wanted to give away the female lead role to someone else. Lin Che replied, I didn't want to create any more trouble. Besides, I'm not stupid. My part is already there. When the audience sees her name first, they wouldn't imagine that she would be with your character. Yu Minmin also sounded out from behind, rest assured, Mr. Gu. I wouldn't have given her the role that easily. I only thought that if she succeeded today, there would be public outcry tomorrow. I would never put my artist in a disadvantageous position. Gu Jingze sighed again before turning to Lin Che, always remember this. You are mine and with me as your cover, you don't have to give her this much face. Understood? Yes, I understand. Lin Che looked at Gu Jingze, knowing that he was only doing this for her own good. Gu Jingze left soon after. Yang Lingxi did not even dare to take a breath after looking at what just happened. Only then did she walk over, Sister Che, it's so great to see Gu Jingze look after you this much. I bet that no one will dare to bully Sister Che in the future. Lin Che smiled and thought about how Gu Jingze wanted a present from her. He was unafraid of angering others to help her and it made her feel extremely grateful. Thus, she started thinking as she walked, wondering what she should buy for him. After reaching home, she thought deeply but could not seem to think of what to buy for him. In the end, she decided to get him a watch. Successful people such as himself would definitely wear a watch. To be honest, Lin Che was too unfamiliar with watches. Therefore, she left the task to Yu Minmin. Yu Minmin purchased one on a whim. Her thought was simple, Gu Jingze had everything and would never bother about what others gave as a present. It was the thought that mattered, and therefore, anything was fine. Lin Che received the watch that Yu Minmin bought and looked at it a few times in the bedroom. The watch looked nice and it was not cheap. After looking at it a few more times, she left it on the table. Gu Jingze was extremely busy for the next few days. On one hand, he had to handle Gu Jingyan's wedding, which was going to be extravagant and therefore required precise control over the matters. On the other hand, he had to handle work that had been delayed for a few days. When he got back, he removed his coat and casually asked the maid where was the wife. The maid replied, Madam must have been exhausted with filming these few days. She went to bed the minute she came back. Gu Jingze only nodded slightly and didn't want to disturb her. He proceeded to take a bath in the bathroom outside before entering the bedroom. Lin Che was indeed sleeping very soundly. Gu Jingze walked over and sat beside her before giving off a silly smile. At this moment, his eyes caught a glimpse of an exquisite box lying on the dressing table. He paused for a moment before reaching out for the box. Upon opening the box, he saw a watch meant for a guy and was stumbled for a moment. Did she just buy this? Who was she planning to give it to? Was it for him? His heart trembled slightly and his lips unwittingly curled up at the corners. Seeing that she was still sleeping, he didn't call her out and proceeded to place the watch back into the box. Laying down, he looked at Lin Che and proceeded to embrace her. He looked down at her cheeks and very gently gave her a kiss. The next day, after Lin Che woke up, she noticed that Gu Jingze had a pleasant expression on his face. It seemed like he was in a good mood. She rubbed her eyes gently. You're up early. Yeah, I've got to get to the office. You can continue to sleep for a while more. It's okay, I have to continue filming today. She sat up slightly afterward with some difficulty. With the thought of having to film more today, she still forced herself to get up. Gu Jingze's eyes swept over the box at the side. The corners of his lips curled but he said nothing and subsequently left the room. Lin Che, however, did not notice the look on Gu Jingze's face and proceeded to wash up without putting on makeup. She had to apply makeup at the studio anyway, so she just stumbled along to the studio after waking up. Before leaving, she suddenly remembered the watch. She took the watch and left swiftly after. At the studio, Lin Che was putting on makeup in the makeup room with Gu Jingze. Lin Che saw Gu Jingze walk in and tossed the present over. Gu Jingze stumbled and said, "What is this?" Lin Che said, "Didn't you say you don't only want a word of thanks? This is a present for you." Gu Jingze laughed and hurriedly opened the box. Seeing the watch inside, he laughed even more heartily as he slid the watch on. Wow, the size even fits perfectly. Lin Che thought to herself that it was only natural. With Yu Minmin's capabilities, she must have at least found out his size before buying the watch. She smiled. Now, you can't say that I haven't thanked you properly. Not bad, not bad. You are worthy of teaching. Gu Jingze patted Lin Che's head while laughing happily. It looked like his mood lifted greatly. He strode out with the watch on his wrist. Lin Che shook her head helplessly. Honestly, he was just like a little child. On this day, the internet suddenly started attacking Lin Che. People said that Lin Che stole Shin Xiaoyuan's role as the lead actress. Now that the poster was up with both of their names, they were more certain that Lin Che purposely stole Shin Xiaoyuan's role and had her name placed above Shin Xiaoyuan's name in the poster. Lin Che was immediately bombarded with attacks from Shin Xiaoyuan's fans online. However, Lin Che's fans were not to be belittled. After being bombarded, they immediately launched a counterattack stating that Lin Che and Gu Jingze were playing as rivals. She was definitely the lead actress, so why should Shin Xiaoyuan's name be placed before hers? The two fan groups started a heated argument and sent the internet into a frenzy with the dispute between the two actresses. Lin Che would have never expected that Shin Xiaoyuan's fans could twist facts like this. What started off with Shin Xiaoyuan orchestrating all of this was now pushed onto her.